For me, like I had to, take a backseat to music for about 2 years, which, was pretty discouraging, but I didn't let that stop me.
It kind of made me think like also, there's not like this set timeline that like,
Not
okay,
at
well,
all.
your career has to look like this by this age and whatever.
Yeah, I think that's really important and something that I think about quite often. Hello, and welcome to the Orchestrating Your Career podcast. I'm your host, Rebecca for short, and I'm a clarinetist who studied at the Eastman School of Music and then went to London to get my master's and PhD, both at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. Having shifted pathways in my own life, I love hearing about the varied careers musicians can have and how they got there. And that's precisely what we're exploring in this podcast, as I sit down with music graduates to chat about their unique musical journeys, hear their hard-earned wisdom, and learn about how they're orchestrating their own careers. For today's episode, I had the pleasure of chatting with Shawn Halim and Stacey Chou. Shawn got his bachelor's degree in popular music and keyboard at the University of Southern California and now works as a producer and a music director. Stacey got her bachelor's degree in music education with piano as her primary instrument from the Eastman School of Music, and then went on to get her master's and her Graduate Performance Diploma in flute performance from the Longy School of Music. She is an active performer on both piano and flute, nationally and internationally. I loved learning about what a degree in popular music can even look like from Shawn, as well as Stacey's experience serving in the Air National Guard Band of the Northeast on flute and piccolo. It also was quite fascinating to see their different journeys in these worlds of popular versus classical music and how these two worlds intersect. You're listening to Stacey and Shawn performing under this intro. Stay tuned till the end of the episode to hear some more of their music. And now let's get right into the interview. Hello, Stacey and Shawn, and welcome to the Orchestrating Your Career podcast. Thank you both so much for coming on.
Of course.
It's really fun to have both of you on the podcast. This is the first episode where I'm having two guests at the same time, which is very fun. And you two are married, so
Yes,
I got
to each other.
Yes, to each other. And I got to attend your wedding almost 2 years ago, and that was the first place that I met you, Shawn. But I've known Stacey since we were roommates together at the Eastman School of Music. I thought it would be really fun to have both of you on the podcast because you're both wonderful musicians, but in slightly different parts of the music industry. So I thought it'd be really interesting just to explore those different pathways. So Stacey did her undergraduate at Eastman in music education with an emphasis on piano, and then went on to get her master's at the Longy School of Music in flute performance.
And a Graduate Performance Diploma.
Thank you. So very much in the classical music space. And then Shawn did his undergraduate in popular music at the University of Southern California. So I just think it's really interesting to see the different journeys that you've taken. But before all of that, Stacey, could you just start us off by sharing how you got into classical music? How did you end up playing the piano and then the flute?
Sure. Well, I do come from a rather musical family, in my opinion. So everyone on my mom's side is extremely musical. I have several professional musicians on that side of the family. And even on my dad's side, my dad himself, amateur musician, but he's very musically gifted, I would say, like inclined. He played violin all throughout college. He plays acoustic guitar. He definitely knows how to carry a tune and stuff. He actually was the one to hand me my first violin at the age of 2 and teach me how to play the violin, none of which I remember, but I have many pictures. I pretty much was immersed in music like my whole life. And as far as interest goes, I think it just kind of went along with that. And I remember even as a very young kid, like single digits kind of thing. One of my favorite memories is going to my grandparents' house in New Jersey. I'm originally from New York, and we would go to New Jersey occasionally and visit my grandparents, and my grandparents had a record player with a lot of different vinyls of classical performances from different orchestras, different conductors and things. But my favorite one was a recording of Peter and the Wolf with the New York Phil and Leonard Bernstein conducting, and I literally would sit there for just like sit and listen for the entire recording. And it would be on repeat often too. So yeah, I have a lot of core memories like that. And I would say officially my first instrument was piano. I started taking piano lessons at the age of 5. And I started flute at age 8, and shortly afterwards I started violin. So for several years I was doing those 3 instruments as my sort of core instruments. I did take a random harp lesson because my mom, she was a pianist and also a harpist, and she made me take a harp lesson, but I remember not liking it too much, and so that didn't really stick. And then I also took up clarinet for a year in school when everyone was picking instruments, and it was heavily influenced by Peter and the Wolf because my favorite part to this day is the clarinet cap part.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, so I picked up clarinet, but again, I think I felt like it wasn't exactly for me, and so I was, back to doing piano, violin, and flute. And then around the age of 12, my dad and I had a conversation, and he was like, you're getting really busy with like school and activities, and you're playing 3 instruments, so you have to give up either violin or flute, because giving up piano as an Asian kid is not really an option. And so I ended up picking, I ended up sticking with the flute. I actually originally picked violin, but my dad convinced me to stick with the flute somehow. And so that's just basically how I continued till this day, playing both the piano and flute. Yeah, like I was pretty involved with musical activities. I was in band at school, I did youth orchestra outside of school, and I even started leading worship at my church and doing like children's worship too at their youth group, starting in high school, and doing things like summer camps involving music. So there was just like a lot of musical influence. I always loved music. Like I have another core memory of a friend of mine, a classmate of mine in school, in elementary school. We would make up songs on the swings together and like kind of use the rhythm of the swings to like have that be our beat. And
so
I did
sweet.
make up a lot of like songs on the piano when I was a little kid and would like write them down. I'm sure I have notes somewhere. Yeah, so it was just like always a great love of mine. I never really saw it professionally as a career until like way late in high school, like literally like applying to colleges. And I was applying to colleges both for music and also not music stuff, because I was interested in a lot of things, a lot of subjects, and so I did apply to most of my schools with like a non-music major, but because music was, obviously a love of mine, I was like, yeah, like why not? So I did apply to several music departments and conservatories, as music too. And as far as education, I think because I was also kind of involved with like teaching and leading and that kind of, relationship with other people, to me that seemed like a no-brainer. Of course, like I loved performing, but I think I was kind of like, okay, this is what I see myself for now, like doing as a career, like something in that kind of field.
And that was through high school you were getting involved in teaching.
Yeah, I did a lot of like coaching and like group leading at my church, like I was mentioning, and I did start at private teaching at the time as well. I guess it's like basically my musical journey until college, and then even in college, which I'm sure we can get into later, there were some like, more revelations there that set me more firmly in the path of like, professionally pursuing music as my sole career choice.
Yeah, and just a really rich background. You're playing so many different instruments, and it sounds like you're playing around with a lot of different parts of music, like composing and making up tunes at a young level, but still just trying out a bunch of different sides of music, which is cool because you loved it so much. Yeah. And so, Shawn, could you share now about your musical background? Piano was your emphasis at university, and you were telling me the other day that that's what you've been formally trained in, but you also ended up teaching yourself voice and guitar. So how did you start on the piano and then bring these other instruments in as well?
Yeah, sure. So unlike Stacey, I came from a very non-musical family. My dad had like very basic guitar in him, but like other than that, my mom kind of liked singing too. I don't know if she was any good at it, but you know, like that was the extent of our like musicality, I guess, in our family. So my parents put me into classical piano lessons at the age of 4 because they found me on like one of those like toy keyboards or whatever, and I was just kind of like sounding out songs that I would hear. I think I heard like the Barney song or whatever, and I would just be like playing it on the little toy keyboard, and my parents were like, oh, like, you know, this kid's got an ear, you know. So that's why they decided to put me into classical piano. I started on group lessons, then moved on to private lessons. And around that time, you know, we were also going to church, and I was, you know, all the kids were put in the children's choir or whatever. So I would kind of sing in the children's choir, and they would occasionally give me solos and stuff like that too as a kid. But you know, it was just like little kid, like I was probably like 5 or 6 or whatever, but it was just these like cute kid solos or whatever. I actually stopped singing after that, at least in public. Just because I had this weird notion that like when my voice changed, like I just wouldn't be able to sing anymore. It was weird. But yeah, so I was doing classical piano, sang in church a little bit here and there. And then I started violin around late elementary school, just because, you know, they were like the music program was starting. They were asking people to pick an instrument, so I just picked violin because I thought that was interesting. But I soon realized that I was not very good at it, and there were so many other people who were taking private violin lessons that were just miles ahead of me. So come middle school, I think I decided to switch to viola.
Okay.
And then I didn't really like viola, so I decided to switch to cello. And then I found the same issue, that there were just a bunch of cellos that were way better than me. So in high school, I finally switched to double bass. So all that to say,
Finished it off.
yes, just finished it off. Yep, exactly. All that to say, I was very like much in the orchestra scene. Really liked strings. Around 4th grade, going back, I also tried to learn guitar. My dad would try to teach me like whatever basic guitar that he knew, but I sucked at it. I was so bad. I couldn't like I guess my fingers couldn't hold down the strings, you know, well enough, and it just sounded really, really bad. So I quit. I didn't like it, and I was just like, maybe guitar is just not for me. And it wasn't until around late middle school that late middle school, early high school, I think, that I tried it again. There was like a couple songs on the radio that I had heard, and I just wanted to test them out on guitar. So I just looked up some stuff online, looked up how to play some chords and things like that. And it just clicked to me. I don't know what happened, but maybe it just like grew up and matured and my hands got bigger, whatever, I don't know.
All that string experience.
Exactly, all that string experience. So guitar just like clicked and it made sense to me. So after that, I was really invested in guitar. I would just look up stuff online, like tutorials and chord charts and tabs and things like that, and just try to hear or play whatever songs I would hear on guitar. So that's when I started picking up guitar again and started just learning it on my own. And then around that same time, we had switched churches, and there was this worship leader at this new church that I was at, that he kind of saw the potential in me for keys. He was also Indonesian like me, so we bonded like that. But he was gracious enough to kind of show me my first keyboard, my first synthesizer. And that was a very defining moment for me, I would say. I'd never seen that like a piano could be used with different sounds and all these things that you could do that were super cool, that wasn't just classical piano. And so that was when I started shifting more from classical to like more of the pop world, I would say. Starting with church, with like worship music. He would actually take me, he kind of like did these little worship tours around Southern California. And he would take me as like this like late middle school, early high school student with like a bunch of his friends who were like college, post-college, just to play at these like churches and events and things like that. And that was just super cool. Like I just felt like, wow, I'm like on tour as like a young kid, getting to play keyboard and all that. But he really developed me. I think he saw the potential in me in keyboards, but also in guitar. He knew that I was like learning guitar again, and somehow found out that I sang as well. And so I that was when I started singing in public again, starting in church, but then throughout high school too. I was that kid that would just like bring my guitar and like, we'd have jam sessions and things like that.
cool.
But I kind of became known as like the music guy at high school. Like I played a bunch of different instruments and people would come up to me to like, hey, can you accompany me on this or whatever? And yeah, high school was the first time like I sang at a concert, and sang in public again, and people just really encouraged me to, they're like, hey, you got a great voice, like keep singing. So all that to say, just a lot of different instruments. I was always the kid who would just like, I couldn't decide on what instrument to focus on, but I ended up picking up harmonica and accordion and banjo and just like all these weird random instruments because I was just curious. But I guess I never considered music as a career because I just didn't. I applied to every college as electrical engineering. And if not for USC, and we can talk about that later too, but it was pretty much the only music school I applied to. So I didn't consider music as a career, but I guess, just somehow got placed into it. And
Found you anyways.
yeah, yeah. So yeah,
Cool.
That's just my story.
Cool. And I think it's really interesting how one of you came from a really musical family and the other didn't, but it still sounds like your beginnings in music were similar-ish, like really experimental, trying out all these different kinds of instruments and just exploring. And I think that's kind of cool that there's still that parallel, even though the environment was quite different.
Yeah.
So, Shawn, how then did you end up doing a major in popular music at USC? You said that you were applying to all of these engineering programs. Had you applied to USC for engineering as well, and that's how you found the music program?
Yeah, I was intending to. So actually, my first visit to USC was like the USC open house, and it actually so happened that I had scheduled for like this early scholarship, engineering school scholarship interview on the day of the open house. So they just kind of overlapped. So I remember going and doing, checking out the engineering school. I was like, this is pretty cool. And I went in for my interview and just flopped the interview. It was so bad. Probably the worst interview I've ever done in my life. I was getting all these questions that I just, quite frankly, couldn't really answer. Like I didn't know how to answer. I just walked out of that interview feeling so sad because USC was my dream school, and I was like, well, I don't know if I'm gonna get in, like that was I knew it was like that was the worst interview I've ever done. So I remember walking out, it was like pouring rain. It was
California.
Like something from a movie. It was just like, I was really sad. And I decided to just check out the music school just for kicks. I had thought that actually my classical piano could potentially carry me into music school. I don't know, I'd done like recitals and competitions and all that. So I was like, is there a chance, that I could potentially do music? Well, it was pretty late in the day, and like the only program that had kind of an exhibition during the open house that was left was this thing called popular music. Never heard of it before, never even knew that could be a major. Yeah. And in fact, I heard that it was actually pretty new when I walked into the exhibition. So the first thing that they did was no speaker came out or whatever. They just like brought out one of their student bands to go out and play a couple songs. And they played like a couple originals and things like that. And as I'm sitting in the auditorium and I'm watching this band play, I'm like focusing on the keyboardist, of course, because that's, my main instrument. Yeah. And so I'm watching him play and I'm like, I know what he's doing. I know what he's doing on the synthesizer and how he's controlling the sounds and different things like that. And I was like, could this like be something that I'm potentially interested in? And so the dean of popular music comes out and he gives this little spiel about, it was kind of a newish major. Like they had only just graduated their first seniors, like
Oh,
the
wow.
previous year. But there were already like pretty established people that were there. For example, Scott Hoying from Pentatonics. He had attended USC Pop Music.
Amazing.
Yeah. And so, I mean, he had dropped out by that time because
He was doing great things.
Yeah, exactly. But as I'm hearing everything, I'm like, could this be where I'm supposed to be at? And I just decided to apply. After that, after the open house, I went home and I'm thinking about it, and I was like, maybe I should just try and apply here. So I went through the process. It was kind of this crazy process to audition. I think there was 3 rounds where the first round was like a video screening. You just record a couple of videos and then you send it in.
Of what?
Of just yourself playing and what kind of emphasis that you want to go into. So for me, it was like keyboards. But I think going into that audition process, I wanted to demonstrate, I thought that versatility was like one of my biggest strengths. So I played a piece of like a medley that I had arranged myself on the piano, and then I played an original and sang on guitar, and then I played a cover on piano and sang that, and just try to showcase like this is what I can do. I'm not just a keyboardist, but I can do more. So I sent in the audition. I got a call back for a live audition, and so. At the live audition, again, tried to showcase that same thing, that same versatility. I played a song that I'd done from the video recordings, but then I also did something new. Actually, just a crazy story. In the practice room before the audition, I wasn't like feeling a song that I had practiced, and I was like, I decided to change it. I don't know why. This
Right
is
before the
crazy.
audition?
Yeah. Literally, the true story.
I would never.
Right
All the classical
before,
musicians are like,
I know.
Exactly.
True story. Right before the audition in the practice room, I'm like, I'm gonna change this song.
Wow.
And I played a song. I played "No Air" actually by Chris Brown and Jordan Sparks.
Great song.
Yeah. And I was like, I like the song better. I'm gonna do this, and I just changed.
Wing it.
That's so funny.
That's so pop music.
Yeah, I know, right? But yeah, so I went in again, had my guitar, had my key, there was a piano and a mic there and stuff. So again, able to show versatility. And then they also did an audition where they had grouped us into different bands.
So
And
this was a separate round.
This is a separate round, yeah. And they grouped us into different bands, and they had given us the song before and 2 songs before, and they had us perform the songs. And their assignment was to play it exactly to the recording. So don't like don't improvise, don't like do anything crazy. Just like play what you hear. That's all. Yeah, so the college, decisions start coming in, and all my engineering schools that I applied to just rejected. And I was just like, wow, this is crazy, I think I got luckily my backup school or whatever I got in.
Through.
But then the last decision was USC, the one that I got. And just miraculously, I'd gotten in. I was
Amazing.
one of 20 students that year to have gotten into pop music, and one of 2 keyboardists that have gotten in. And I mean, I don't know if the podcast knows your love for Taylor Swift, but
I think they might have gotten it.
Okay. But that keyboardist, Karina DiPiano, she has now gotten to be the keyboardist on Taylor Swift's Eras tour, which is crazy.
Yeah, I've been following her throughout the tour, and when I
Yes.
found out that Shawn knew her, I just about died.
Yep, but us too. We were the only keyboard
Incredible.
emphasis popular music majors in that year. So yeah, I think that's pretty much the story of my college.
Getting
decision.
in, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I really appreciate you breaking down that application process, because I think for a lot of people, I similarly, like you were saying, didn't even really know that popular music was a major, especially at that time, when you're applying to schools. So
Yeah.
a lot of musicians might not even realize that's an option or something that you could study and go into. And so I'm wondering if you could do similarly for the course of popular music, because I think, again, for classical musicians, that might be a pretty murky area, and I know I don't really have an idea of what a degree in popular music could even look like. So what did yours look like?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, just to comment on what you said, I mean, yeah, it still is a new major. I think some universities are starting to pick it up, but the way that dean had pitched it was that, you know, a lot of schools have classical and a lot of schools have jazz, but they don't have anything for the pop program. So I think USC really was one of the spearheads for that. And now we're starting to see more and more of it. But anyway, for USC, what a pop degree looked like, we started off with, you know, kind of the basics. I mean, similar, I think, crossover to classical majors as well. We would have our basic music theory classes and things like that, and like ear training or oral skills, as they called it. That class. We had some like music history type classes too. They were a little more focused on like the pop side of things. So yeah, we shared all that in common. I need to mention too that similar to classical, we also had private instruction too.
Okay.
So we met with a teacher. I met with, my teacher was kind of this keyboards legend, this pop artist legend, really. Her name was Patrice Rushen, and she was really big in the 80s.
Your
She had
favorite
this,
era, too.
yes, and my favorite era, which is the 80s. And she had a big hit called Forget-Me-Nots, which was sampled by Will Smith in the Men in Black soundtrack.
Incredible.
So if you know the Men in Black theme song, that's her song, you know? So, but she was amazing. I mean, she really like, again, as a classical, like coming in like mostly classical, I know I had, you know, started some pop stuff, but I didn't know much jazz. I didn't know much like R&B or gospel or other styles, even Latin pop or whatever. She just really kicked my butt on a lot of that stuff. And I'm really glad that she did, because nowadays that's my favorite style to play in. Like I love R&B. I love playing gospel and things like that. I'm still growing in jazz. Like I wouldn't call myself the best jazz pianist in the world, but like I can, you know, I can work with it, right? But yeah, I think she just really kicked my butt in a lot of those areas, you know. So for the pop music side, because it was a performance degree, we had performance class as our big, that was the biggest core, especially in our freshman and sophomore years, where we would get put into bands each week. We would have to set up like a rehearsal time on our own and things like that, book studios to rehearse in. But we were assigned songs each week, and it would go through the history of pop music. So we started off with like Big Mama Thornton, Elvis Presley, Hound Dog. The classics, you know, Ray Charles and stuff like that. All the way, it would go through like, go through Motown, go through Michael Jackson, and, you know, classic rock like Led Zeppelin, things like that, all the way to music of today. Like we ended up playing like Katy Perry and Frank Ocean and things like that. Yeah, so, but our assignment was to not cover the song, but like it was with the audition, to really play it just as it was recorded on the record, you know, however many years before. Because the goal was that we weren't trying to make it our own, but to get those techniques and tones and sounds that they used back in the day to incorporate into our music today. We just had to do it like to the T, you know? That was really, that was different, you know, because I think a lot of days, you know, nowadays we like to cover songs and make it our own and put our own twist on it. But this was really unique because we learned from imitating them and trying to get it like exactly like how they got it. And then, so we would play it in class, and then we'd get critiqued, you know? We would say like, oh, maybe that keyboard sound, like we could change it in this way. Or that actually wasn't the part, like they actually play these notes instead, or whatever. Yeah, and then we got feedback from the rest of the class. That was our performance class, freshman and sophomore year. Junior year, we turned into original songwriting. So we became a songwriting factory. I mean, that's essentially what it was, you know. So each week we would get assigned or like every rotation, every cycle, we'd get assigned a different role. So you might be a songwriter, you might be a producer, an arranger, or a session band, part of the in-house studio band. It would be these 2-week cycles. The first week you would, the songwriters write a song and just whatever they wanted. And they would workshop it with the other songwriters that were assigned that week and give critique and things like that and things to make it better. And then the songwriters would work with the producers and the arrangers to say, like, how do we write the sheet music for the rest of the band? Or how do we make it sound more full with a complete band and things like that? And then the following week, the in-house band would get the sheet music. They would have never heard the song. And we would have to record those songs in 20 minutes. Yeah, just 20 minutes for each song. And whatever came out, that was it.
Oh.
Yeah, that was the demo. So you might get 2 or 3 takes or however long it took, So it was a lot of pressure, on the in-house band to like sight read this stuff and make it sound exactly how the songwriter or the producers want it. And it was a lot of pressure on the producer too, because they had to direct the band and tell them what to do.
Yeah.
It was so much fun.
Yeah.
And it's very real life application because
I was thinking that, yeah.
Yeah. A lot of studios nowadays, you book them and you might not have all the time in the world. You might only have an hour. And it's expensive.
Yeah.
So that was the goal. It's like time is money, so that you got to get it out quick and it's got to be good. So yeah, that was that class. And then finally, the other core piece was the guest forum class. Okay. And that was always super fun. It was like always Friday afternoon. So it was like kind of the end of your week. It was a great way to end the week. And they would just bring in professionals from around the industry, whether it be, music lawyers or record label people or A&R, whatever. But they would also bring in just random special guests like artists, like people like Earth, Wind, and Fire come to class.
Cool.
The Eagles, David Foster, who was like one of my piano like idols growing up. He came, and even in that class, like the late great Chester Bennington from Linkin Park was sitting right in front of me, and he was just there to enjoy the class.
Wow.
Which is crazy,
Yeah.
Other guests like John Mayer, Tori Kelly, like. Yeah, so it was just like a really, really fun time and a great way to learn real life experience from these like industry professionals, right? But that was that. And then we also had electives. Like I took history of the Beatles class, which was like super, super fun.
Cool.
I love the Beatles.
Kind of had that.
We did,
Yeah. Oh, at Eastman. That's cool. Nice. But yeah, little things like that, you know, so yeah, that was pop music. I should also mention that I did minor in business as well. And that was also connection. I wanted to do that because I wanted something that was a little less artsy, more practical.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to see how business connected to my, major, my music, right? Because music is still a business, right?
Absolutely.
At the end of the day. And it was really fun. I really enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy like all the classes. I enjoyed marketing, but like all the like economics and finance and all that, I was just like, maybe I didn't have to do that. but it was very informative, and I'm still glad that I did minor in business.
And you added that on in the middle of your studies? Or?
Actually, yeah, I think like halfway through freshman year or something, that's when I decided. A lot of my friends at the time too were business majors, so it was cool too to get to like overlap classes with them. My roommate was a business major at the time too, so we got to overlap in classes and things like that. So
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear you talk about the course and all of the components, and like you were saying, it sounds really practical. I think it's really cool how you got to experience a lot of different sides of popular music. Even you were saying, playing in the in-house band, being producer, being the songwriter, all these different sides so that you can really get a holistic view of what that is. And I think that's really important, especially at an undergraduate level, maybe even especially for new kinds of courses like this, where students might not have a good idea of what they want to do in the popular music industry. So then they get to try out all these different ways of being in popular music. And I think that's really interesting. I also feel like there's still a lot of parallels with classical music. And just hearing about you talking about, going through the history of popular music, I was thinking, oh, that's similar to like our classical music history classes that we had to take, of just going through from, Bach all the way up to atonal music. And, it's a similar thing, but just in a different realm. So it's cool to see the sort of different parallels.
Oh, yeah. I think they probably mirrored the major mostly after other music majors that already existed.
Yeah,
So.
which makes sense. But I really like the very practical aspect of that course, and also the opportunity just to try out a bunch of different pathways, because I feel like one thing that I felt, and I wonder if Stacey also felt similarly, was in classical music training, it seems like there was a sort of set pathway, and you were very much trained in that. Me as an instrumentalist, was very much orchestral pathway, and it sounds like your experience was a little bit more exploratory.
Totally,
and trying out different ways of being within the industry, which I think there's pros and cons on both sides, of course, but I think it's really cool and really interesting that that was your experience, that you got to experience all those different things.
Yeah, and like even nowadays, like I see my friends who've graduated from and not all of them perform, like, but they all work, I would say, like within the music industry realm, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's like Karina who's playing keys for Taylor Swift, but there's also friends of mine who are working for Spotify or like working for Capitol Records or Universal and like things like that. Like they might perform on the side, but they are working still within the music industry realm. And I would say that's because our major really allowed for that. It was okay to be exploratory and to be diverse. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Amazing. So now, Stacey, I'm really interested in what your experience was as an education major. You were talking a bit at the beginning about how you had this desire to teach and educate, and that's what made you want to do this education major at Eastman. So what was your experience like there? Yeah, just what was that course like?
Yeah. I had a great time at Eastman. I think most people who go there just love it and have a great fondness for it. So that was definitely my experience too. And I had a great education, of course. I mean, side note, like, I think my main takeaway from that experience was really like the experience of it, having all those great opportunities, having access to amazing faculty, and also the community. I think Eastman is just a really special place for support and building lifelong friends and finding yourself, of course. And I think that was probably like just the most special thing for me about Eastman was really the community.
Yeah.
But to talk about like the program a little bit, I do think the music education department and a lot of the departments at Eastman now, like a decade later, do look different. Like we know that they've since added new majors, new departments, new construction, like a lot of stuff. But how it looked when I was a student, when we were students, I would probably say compared to the other majors, we had most of the same classes. Like Shawn was saying, theory, history, all this kind of stuff. And then in addition to all of those types of classes, the music education majors had to take methods classes, learning all of the different instruments, and pedagogy classes, and like psychology classes, and different things related to learning, related to institutions and schools, and things like that, development, in addition to the private lessons. And
yours were in piano, were your private lessons?
Yeah, I studied with Vincent Lenti, who, shout out to Vincent Lenti. He is amazing. He was such a great teacher and, pushed me personally and musically, and is just a great mentor figure. And I was also really lucky that even though I was a pianist at Eastman, that I was still able to pursue flute. So it really wasn't until college that I kind of had to like choose one instrument over the other. Because like for me, taking lessons and being active in all these different groups, like I mentioned, like band and orchestra and church and things like that, like I was playing piano and flute very equally. And so I think because of like the music education major and that decision, it was more natural for me to have piano as my primary instrument for that. But even so, even though I was prioritizing piano for the first time over flute, I was lucky to take lessons still in flute and play with one of the wind ensembles. And I also played with one of the orchestras at the U of R at the University of Rochester that's attached to Eastman. So it was really nice that I could still continue like my flute education while I was doing piano.
Yeah. Well, and just going off of that, because then you ended up doing a master's in flute performance. Was there a time period at Eastman where you were considering shifting from that more music education pathway that you were on to something more performance-based and looking more towards the flute? What was that process like of sort of figuring out what your career pathway was while you were at Eastman?
Yeah, there wasn't exactly like a defining moment, but I think just through my experience and through, just spending time in college, I felt like my desire for my career wasn't exactly in the classroom and teaching music in that way. And so that was kind of when, I guess it was like sort of near the end of college, I was really loving performing a lot and going away from like teaching education in like sort of the traditional context. So I think that's why I was thinking performance in general for like my grad degrees. And then it was really just like a practical reason for the flute performance, which was mainly just because, like I said, for the first time I had to prioritize one instrument over the other. So for grad school, I was like, okay, let me just like flip the order of that. And so like for 4 years for my undergrad degree, I did piano. And then because I did my master's and my graduate performance diploma, then I had like pretty much the equal amount of higher education. Yeah, in both to like make it even. Yeah. So that was pretty much it.
When you were going into grad school, were you looking at a bunch of different graduate schools? How did you decide on Longy? And then were you looking specifically at flute performance majors, or had you considered other things as well?
Yeah, I would say almost all of them were flute performance. I did apply to Eastman again for music education and piano, in a way as like a backup, although I'm sure like most people would be like, Eastman as a backup, that's weird. But like, there's just some like comfort in, like I had gone there and I would have been studying with Mr. Lunty again. And it wasn't like, oh, I hated music education, like never wanted to teach in a school ever again or something like that. Like it was just like, I realized like my interests were like evolving. But I did apply to Eastman again for music education and piano. Everywhere else was flute performance. And then as far as Longy in particular, I think this happens a lot in like graduate school. You really kind of focus on your relationship with your professor and your development personally, like as a musician. Whereas like for undergraduate, of course I was like interested in having a great relationship with my teacher. I wanted to, enjoy taking lessons with him for 4 years and things like that. But it was also like kind of about like the college experience and like what the school would offer me and if I would like being on campus and like, if I could see myself going there. Whereas like for grad school, I wasn't like, I didn't live on campus as a graduate student. I was there like solely to like focus on school, on my studies, how that could lead me to the next step in my career. So I was really just focusing on the connection between me and my potential future professor. So I had a trial lesson with the person who would become my professor, Marco Granados, and it was like an instant connection. And I loved what we talked about, and I was really interested in seeing where we could go together in that kind of partnership. And yeah, that was really what drew me to Longy. It's a much smaller school, much smaller program, but I think it really fit me well as a graduate student in that time of life. And even coming from a place like Eastman to have something different, like a different type of environment, I think was really helpful for my growth as a musician.
How was the environment different? How did it compare from being in Boston grad school to your undergraduate experience?
Yeah, like I mentioned, it was a lot smaller, and Eastman itself is, I guess, like blessed with a lot of opportunities that the school itself can provide, and even being attached to a research institution, the opportunity is, just plentiful. So we had a lot of set programming. We had like so much faculty who had so much life and career experience, like so many classes to choose from, too many classes to choose from maybe. You know, this ensemble and this activity and this club and this class and whatever, you know, we could take any classes. We could fulfill all of our requirements at Eastman, but you could also take whatever class you wanted to at the University of Rochester. You could major in something, which that's what I started out on. I ended up dropping that after sophomore year, but I even entered as a major at U of R as well.
Double major.
Yeah. I mean, technically like a different degree, but details. So then at Longy, it's quite a small school, and for the graduate students, I think there's about like 100, so it really is very intimate. And I think I had come in with just a different expectation. I was like, essentially, the only experience I knew was like coming from undergraduate at Eastman. So I was like a little bit shocked in a way when I was like, oh wait, the school doesn't provide this type of program, or like the orchestra is this big, or like why can't I like be in the like ensemble cycle every cycle, or like some, you know, just little things like that that first semester when I was there I was kind of frustrated by. But then after that I was like, well, this is the opportunity to make something out of it. And I was really able to make the graduate program my own. And I think that's what Longy encourages, like to let your individual voice shine, to let that student like sort of curate your educational experience. And there was a lot of also practical application to like real world, like there's this one program there called the Teaching Artist Program. And basically in a very, very non-summative like statement, like how can we bring anyone into the world of music, you know? So I think that kind of like open-endedness was like really helpful as a graduate student who is needing to be more independent and make that transition from student, receiver, learner to like the person who is in charge of your career. So I think like, at least for me personally, it wouldn't have worked the other way around. I think I was, just a good move to, I mean, not move of my design per se, but like it just happened to, work out well that like I was the recipient of a lot of opportunities and things that were built in and structures that were in place in my undergraduate program, and then something that allowed me to be more independent and autonomous, specifically for my graduate studies.
Yeah, and I think worth noting that there were loads of opportunities at Eastman, but you still were quite proactive in getting involved in a lot of things that students didn't have to.
This is true.
Yeah, so you were at U of R doing clubs, taking classes, and getting a lot of extra experiences. And I wonder if maybe that also helped when you were then in an environment where it wasn't as readily available, where you were able to really pull on that and seek out, and you're saying like make something of it, really seek out those opportunities to build your own master's experience as well.
Yeah, and I do have to say it's like a both and, because like the faculty at Longy is like incredible, and Boston itself is like quite a small city, so a lot of the professors like teach at the multiple music schools, so like it wasn't for lack of like quality at Longy for sure. It was just like, the experience was a little bit different.
Yeah, for sure. And I think everyone's undergraduate experience is often different than postgraduate experience. I think it is often that way of undergraduate is much more structured and guided, and then postgrad is less so because you're about to enter the career field, and I think that can really serve students to, like for you, become more independent and really take ownership of your own career pathway. What were you thinking during that time period of what your career would look like when you graduated with, so you were there for 2 years, master's, and then you added on this performance diploma. What was your thought process about what you're going to do after that?
Afterwards, I think it was pretty organic. So I definitely was interested after my master's. I really wanted to go, because the master's is only 2 years. And so I wanted to go a little bit further in my performance and professional development and glean more from my teachers. So that's why I even just added on a more performance-oriented diploma and stayed at Longy for extra time. So that was kind of like my main focus while I was in school. But throughout, I was interested in getting plugged into the city and trying to create opportunities there with performance and taking private students or like coaching ensembles and things like that. I did also co-found a flute quintet in 2014, all 5 flutes, with 4 other of my colleagues in the other, between our studio and the other flute studio. We ended up doing that for 5 years, or I ended up doing that for 5 years. And I left in 2019, but that was started in 2014, so like in the middle of my master's degree. So I think even then, even if I didn't have like a direct trajectory of like, this is where like my career is going to take me, I saw that there was an opportunity and an interest here. I really liked my colleagues. I really liked performing, and the chamber group was like something new and something that we could like take from the ground up to make into something that we foresaw. Yeah, and then also at the end of my graduate performance diploma, coincidentally, a lot of my friends at that time were also winning military band positions. So that was something that I kind of like started looking into because of that. And like also because of that, then I ended up taking and winning a military band audition. For a while, it was military band, my flute quintet, freelancing and performing around the area and private teaching and some coaching and stuff.
Yeah. Cool. And I really want to dig into a lot of those pieces. But first, Shawn, I wanted to ask you a similar question. So when you were doing your degree at USC, did you have thoughts about what your pathway in popular music could look like? I feel like in classical music, there's some really set traditional pathways, playing in an orchestra or teaching music or even freelance musicking, even a freelance musician. And those are pretty known ideas of what a musical career could look like in classical music. Did you have an idea throughout your course of what a career in popular music could look like and what you wanted to do in that space?
Yeah, the short answer is no. I really didn't. I mean, I think, like I said, the major was a performance major, so I knew that, perhaps down the road or sometime, like I would want to perform, I would want to tour and play with a band or whatever. We also, apart from just performing in the set class bands, some of us would just create bands of our own too. Like I had a band throughout my time in college called Small Shelter, which I mean, we didn't really get to do
cool.
much, but we did release like an EP, and things like that. But I think it kind of ended up fizzling out or whatever. But there are actually some bands from USC that ended up continuing on. But I mean, and then like I said earlier on too, like there are just so many things that people did, but they're still within the music industry realm. Yeah. So I think for me, my vision was, again, to do a little bit of everything, to continue on that versatility journey that I had already, that I knew I was good at, doing a lot of different things within the music industry. So I wanted to keep exploring that. At some point I did get to kind of tour and travel for music and perform, and I'm glad that I did that. Do I want to travel all the time? Probably not. I think traveling is pretty tiring nowadays. But I'm doing a lot more production work now. I'm doing a lot more arranging work now or composing. At some point, I do want to get into the business side of the music industry, which I feel like I haven't done much of yet. And who knows? I mean, I may not even like it, but I at least want to like give it a shot and give it a try and see what that looks like. So at least I have that in my belt, in my like toolbox, I guess. But yeah, I think at that point, like honestly, no, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. But I think, again, the beauty of the major was that you got to explore all these different things and decide what you actually wanted to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. So then when you graduated, what did you do? How did you find, because I think that transition period is so difficult
Absolutely.
and really hard to figure out, okay, now I don't have the structure of school and the support and mentorship of teachers and faculty. So how was that transition period for you in entering the career field, and how were you navigating that?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that my transition was the smoothest. I definitely, there were a lot of things that I just wanted to try, and that's what I ended up doing. I don't really advise it because at the end of the day, it was very, very overwhelming. So throughout high school, actually, I was teaching just as Stacey had done as well. I was private teaching, so I was private teaching students in piano and like guitar and voice. And I had done that throughout high school, throughout college even. I would actually come home on the weekends just so I could teach at the music school that I was teaching at. So I continued that. So I had at least that as some solid income. I also, at that time, that Indonesian worship leader that had taken me on throughout, middle school and high school, he ended up transitioning to more of a youth minister role. And so he called me up, right before I was about to graduate and said, like, hey, would you be interested in actually taking over this worship director position at the church? And I thought that sounded interesting. So I was like, yeah, I mean, that's something that I've naturally done even throughout high school and college and led worship and things like that. So I thought, okay, well, that could be a cool, next step. So I took that on. Thirdly, I also was very involved in this college ministry called InterVarsity throughout my time at USC. And I was approached about the possibility of joining InterVarsity staff. So that was completely not music related. It was strictly a ministry position. I was working with college students and on campus and on the grounds and things like that. So I decided to intern there for 2 years. And quickly found out that that was not sustainable. I was, again, trying to just work 3 jobs all in different areas at the same time. And I just quickly got burnt out. It was just really overwhelming, and I knew that something had to go, So, that's kind of the transition, I guess, that really transitioned.
Yeah. How did you begin then figuring out what was sustainable for you and what you wanted your career to start looking like?
Sure, yeah. I think because I'm going to be honest, I think because of my role with InterVarsity and InterVarsity staff, the music actually took more of a, it was secondary. More of a backseat at that time because I just didn't have the time. Like people would be out there gigging and playing and performing, but I had a commitment to be on campus or things like that, so I just, for those 2 years, to be honest, it had to take a backseat for me. And I realized that, okay, well, after those 2 years, my contract as an intern at InterVarsity was up. They asked us to consider to go on full-time staff, and I realized, you know what, I actually want to be back in music again, more involved in music and performing. Because throughout that time, I turned down a lot of gigs and just felt kind of uneasy about that. I was a little unhappy about that. But that's just the place where I was those 2 years, and that was the commitment that I had, and I wanted to stay true to those commitments. So I think at that time, after my internship was done, I decided, you know what, full-time staff probably isn't the best for me. I want to go back into gigging and performing and things like that. So I kind of cut that, And then at a certain point too, I decided that, you know what, teaching is starting to become a little bit draining for me too. It was just taking up a lot of my schedule, and I didn't really like the fact that I had to rely on other people's schedules and students and parents and all that, So I decided, you know what, I kind of want to take a little bit more time for myself, So I decided to quit teaching. That was like around the same time as the pandemic, actually. But actually before that, so in 2018, that was that was a time where I got to perform and play music and travel and stuff. And that was for an intervarsity thing, actually, called Urbana, which is a conference that they put on every 3 years. They assembled this giant worship team. And of course, that's how I met Stacey. Was because of that. Both of us were on the team together. I guess one thing to be grateful for with my connection to InterVarsity was I wouldn't have gotten that gig if not for my time on InterVarsity. So it worked out, but of course there were things that I had to kind of assess and see, like, what's worth my time? What do I want to do in this time of life? What's kind of important to me and significant to me, and go from there, So I guess that was the time where I got to perform and tour just like I had wanted to in those 2 years of my internship when I didn't get the chance to. So it all worked out. I think in the end, I got to do what I wanted to do. And I think going with the flow, although that's not everyone's cup of tea, that is kind of what brought me to where I am today. So.
Yeah, it does. And it seems like that, like you were saying, has worked out for you, that you were able to sort of take on board the doors that were opening at the time for you. And then I think it's really important that you took the time to reevaluate and think about what was important to you and where you wanted to see your life going, and then make changes and adjustments to better fit that, and little pivots
Absolutely.
to, shape your own pathway. How did you then start building up the music side of your career? Because I think particularly for musicians in popular music who are trying to sort of break into the scene or get started in a kind of freelance popular music space, what does that look like, and how did it look like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, and for a lot of my peers, even in the popular music space, it really starts with the connections and the networking. I know people talk about that a lot, but it really is. It starts off with even just your peers, and I'm sure, like, even Stacey was talking about how she connected with her peers to form her quintet. But it starts off with just like, what are people doing, within my peer circle, even within the major. There were, singer-songwriters maybe who needed like a band, so maybe people would go and form a band there. For me, I got connected to a producer / artist manager pretty early on my freshman year, that I still have maintained that relationship today to even what I do today. We had connected, and he had seen that, I played a lot of different things. I had the ability to produce and stuff. So he's asked me to do many a project, and he specifically works, I would say, more so within the K-pop world. And so he's asked me to, hey, Shawn, can you like record some piano on this track? Or, hey, would you want to come to the songwriting session and contribute some ideas? So that network really started what, kind of the freelance K-pop work that I do today, some of that stuff that I do. Throughout my time at USC, I connected with these two guys. Both happened to be named Brian Chung. Shout out to them. And both happened to be...
Brian Chung times 2.
Yes, yeah. Brian Chung times 2. And both of them happened to be groomsmen at my wedding. I became very, very close to them. And they went on to start this company called Alabaster, which not really music related. They're actually a book design company. They take books of the Bible and redesign them into these beautiful like coffee table magazines. You can see some there on the table, on our coffee table right now. Early on, when they started in 2016, they had asked me to create just simple like background music for their Kickstarter video. That's all they wanted. And eventually it turned into this thing that as they blew up, they were asking me actually for each book, could you create a song that, like an instrumental that kind of coincided with themes and elements and feelings that were evoked from those different books of the Bible. And that's kind of blown up as well, so as that company has gone viral and their Bible books are going on TikTok and social media and stuff like that, the music has also been a really crucial part for that because I think for every book of the Bible, now we have a complementary soundtrack to that. So people have really enjoyed that on streaming services, just, whether they're just relaxing or reading or whatever.
Yeah,
It
they're
just,
beautiful.
Thank you. But yeah, that's, again, that's a network thing, a connection that I had early on that spawned to continue on to what I do today. So, yeah, I think, does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's so important. I find it encouraging that even though you had this 2-year period where music did take a bit of a back seat, you were still able to go back to those connections that you had formed. Opportunity still came to you. So I think for people who maybe have to, for any reason, because life happens and circumstances happen, for any reason, if you sort of had to take a step back from music, it doesn't mean that you've lost it all, like you can go back to connections that you have, contacts that you have, and really build on that and get really cool opportunities to do amazing projects like you're doing.
Exactly. And you just keep expanding on those networks, because you might work with someone that has worked with someone else, and then you get connected to them, and it just builds,
It kind of made me think like also, there's not like this set timeline that like,
Not
okay,
at
well,
all.
your career has to look like this by this age and whatever.
Yeah, I think that's really important and something that I think about quite often. I think particularly in classical music, there often is a set pathway, and so I think musicians can feel, oh, I haven't achieved this by a certain time period, or I'm not where I thought I would be at a certain age, or when I finish these degrees, I thought this would happen. And yeah, just really important to remember that every pathway looks different, and that's okay. And whether you take breaks or do different things at different periods, it doesn't determine, where you're going. You can change that and pivot and determine that for yourself. So yeah. So Stacey, what does your career look like now coming out of Longy? And you're talking about that transition period. How did you then build your current career in freelancing?
Well, like I mentioned, I co-founded a flute quintet in 2014, and I did leave in 2019. And that wasn't for lack of love. I did really love performing with them, and I, inherited a lot of skills because of that. When you start a whole new group, you really have to wear all these different hats. So
Absolutely.
I was doing a lot of marketing. I was the grant writer, so I had to come up with all of these projects and ideas and write a lot and like talk to a lot of people and get a lot of rejections and think just really creatively about how we could bring our group and our vision, our mission to the world. And I was also the webmaster at one point and social media. And I did a lot of arranging for the group too, which was really fun. Like I really do enjoy arranging. But at least with that, I did get pretty burnt out by the end. So that was the major reason why I decided to step down in 2019. And who knows, like I might come back to it, to like a chamber group or, doing something where like I'm more of the, with an orchestra or something, you have like a board and you have like other people sort of governing, but with a chamber group, like you guys are like governing. So, who knows, I might come back to something like that because I did really love it. But, that season ended for me. I'm still doing private teaching and a little bit of coaching here and there. I'm very involved with worship at my church and doing guest worship leading elsewhere around the country. Like Shawn mentioned, we both were invited to play with the Urbana 18 worship team and the Urbana 22 worship team, actually. Yeah, and, freelancing, performing around the area. We're currently in LA, but I'm originally from the East Coast, and, I've lived on the East Coast my whole life and have connections there. So I do go back quite frequently to perform and do other work there. And, that could be anything from like leading a workshop to putting on a recital with my colleagues to, playing at an event or subbing with a group or, anything that falls along those lines. And the military band, so I took the audition in 2016. yeah, pretty much like at the end of my schooling, I believe. And
How did you even find out about the opportunity? Because I think this is quite interesting because I think a lot of musicians might not be aware that there's more than just the sort of well-known main military bands, the premier ones. And you're in another one, and I think it's really interesting. So could you share just a bit more about how you even found out about that and found out about the audition and that experience?
Yeah, so the name of my group is called the Air National Guard Band of the Northeast, and we're part of the Air National Guard, like what's in the name, which is part of the Air Force. But the Air Force active duty, that's full-time, and the Air National Guard is part-time. So we meet once a month to, rehearse and do other things related to that, and we'll have concerts every couple months. We usually do an annual tour every summer, and a couple other tours here and there depending on what's needed. How I found it, like I said, I was kind of inspired because a lot of my friends were winning military band auditions, and so I think I literally just Googled it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Internet has all the answers.
Internet is great. Good job, 20th century. And yeah, so I think I was just like looking for openings, and at least for the Air Force, I'm more well versed in the Air Force branch, but I'm sure it's very similar for the other branches, but like everything is just all together. So like because the Air National Guard is part of the Air Force, everything is like on the Air Force website. So then they'll have like Premier Band, like a Premier Band like page on the Air Force website, and like a regional bands and Air National Guard bands. And like at that time that I was looking, there was only a flute vacancy with my band. I'm not positive. I can't quite remember something, like maybe there was a part-time position in the band in Texas or something, but I wasn't super interested in that. So yeah, they had an opening, and so I sent in my materials. They invited me to the audition. They heard me play, a full repertoire list that I had to prepare. They called me back, offered me a position, and gave me some time to think about signing the contract and things. So I thought about it. I thought it was a great opportunity, and really nice to juggle with civilian side, because I already had several students at that time, and of course like all of my connections that I had already been building that whole time that I've been in Boston for performing and stuff. So having like another source of income was like really appealing to me. And also I was thinking like, oh, just another step in the door of performing, because like I had mentioned before, I was like veering away from interests as a career in classroom teaching and really diving in full on with performing. So for me, I was like, oh, this is like another avenue for sure. So I took some time to think about the contract, but I did end up signing it and went to basic training. Then I played with an active duty band for a month, the Band of the Golden West in Northern California. And after that, then I got moved to my current band, which is in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and I've been playing with them since 2017.
Yeah.
I play flute and piccolo with them.
Yeah, and I think it's just quite interesting because, like you were saying, it's another piece to add to what you're already doing. And some people might feel like, oh, a military band job is a full-time gig, and that would be, the main part of my career. But there are opportunities to do something like what you're doing and, have it be a supplemental part of an already rich freelance career. And so I think it's just really cool that you did it. And I think just an area of the music industry and classical music that a lot of musicians might not know about. So
yeah, and like even that can go further because like, sure, maybe now or for the last 10 years since school, like I've been set or something like that. But like even within those 10 years, I feel like things have been changing and growing, and I have a lot of interests, so it's exciting to like do different things. And like what I envision for myself for the next 5 years, like is maybe like a little bit different for what I'm doing now. Of course, I really enjoy what I'm doing now, and it's like really nice to be in sort of like the working force and like play piano and flute and Yeah.
Yeah, because I was going to ask, so all of these different pieces that you're talking about, what's the sort of divide with flute and piano? How active are you? Because you got this really nicely even study of both instruments and really got to devote time to both of them. And so how do they both kind of play in your career now?
Yeah. So with both, I'm trying to perform locally as much as I can, both on the West Coast and the East Coast. So, for piano, a lot of times that'll be for church, playing in worship settings and doing accompanying, teaching private piano lessons, and whatever else the opportunity might need. Like I feel like sometimes the term freelancing is just like a little vague and a little broad, but yeah,
sure.
it is nice that I have the skills to offer, like, hey, I can, if you need a pianist, I can do that. If you need a flute player, I can do that. And of course, like, I'm mainly trained in classical music, but I mean, the way that this day and age is, and even like what worship music calls for, oftentimes, like, I'm not solely doing like classical music. And then for flute, I mean, kind of similarly, but like on flute stuff. So like playing in an ensemble, so my military band, and playing in orchestras around the city. And, I had my chamber group stint for a little bit, or, oftentimes like friends, colleagues of mine will be like, oh, we need a flute for this recording, or, this session, this video.
And the Urbana team.
The Urbana team, yeah. Like, I've done flute for worship teams before. I like hosting and putting on recitals, so I've done a lot of that on both piano and flute. I mean, it's pretty, like, some of the fields, I guess, specific fields are different, but I feel like they're also, like, similar. There's overlaps.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and just really cool that you're able to do both. And really, like you were saying, you enjoy doing a lot of different things. I feel like you've always been doing a lot of different things at every level. Yeah, and so for you to be able to bring that now into your current career and just have a lot of different opportunities and things that you're involved in, I think is cool.
Yeah, I've been really fortunate to have a lot of opportunities in those areas.
Yeah, and you're also like taking auditions actively.
I am,
and preparing for those things as well.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I did get a bit burnt out towards the end of like my time in my flute quintet, and so after that, I was kind of like, let me like take a break and go back to sort of the traditional path that we've all been set up at music conservatory. And so that was when I decided to go a little bit more full force into the audition life and audition for orchestras and military bands on flute. And, I have won some auditions, which is like really amazing. And we'll see. I mean, obviously this podcast is happening in real time. We'll see what the future holds. I'm currently, kind of thinking about a decision with an active duty military band. And yeah, it'd be really awesome to see, because I haven't at this point had like a full-time salaried performing position. So it'd be really cool to see like, this is what I know my life looks like now in these last couple years with like piano and flute and performing and teaching and things like that. And what would it look like if I actually had like a Monday to Friday like daily actual job where I have to like record and play and things like that. And then how would I like rearrange like aspects of my life with piano and flute and performing around the area and personal life stuff and everything. Like it's exciting to think about and plan and like daydream. I mean, planning for me is exciting, maybe not for some other people.
Yeah, for sure. It's really interesting how you were saying that you have been able to draw on what our training was, and just sort of going back to that difference between a more focused training and a more broad exploratory training, and how there are benefits to both sides, and how you're able to now pull on that background and utilize that in your current career and become a little more focused in what you're looking to do in the future.
Yeah,
and I think that's also along the lines of what we were just saying about the timeline thing, and how it doesn't have to be a traditional you graduate and then you get the one job and then that's your thing. Some people it might look like that. Other people you might dabble and do a lot of different things in freelance, and then you could transition into more of a different, pathway of a more focused career. Who knows?
Yeah.
Lots of different things could happen. So
Yeah, and I mean, I am like a big proponent of that timeline or not timeline philosophy.
Not being held to a timeline.
Yeah, I'm not without my own insecurities about my playing, about like my standing as a musician. Like I have to make myself say I'm a professional musician because it's like, no, I really am. I've been doing this for a long time. But you're kind of like, well, do I really deserve to be here? Whatever. And like, even in real life, I've experienced some flack and in college, I would often do music festivals in flute, not exclusively, but like most of them were on flute because like I mentioned, in college was like the first time that I kind of had to like prioritize one instrument or the other. So in the summer, I was like, oh, now I can like do a little bit more of the other thing, like switch. And like, I had one flute teacher ask me like, oh, do you practice flute every day? Like how, essentially kind of like, how serious are you in flute? And I was like, I mean, I've been playing flute for pretty much just as long as I've been playing piano. Like just because that's like not my major right now doesn't mean that I'm not proficient in flute. And, I've experienced stuff like that. And like, it was the same when it was flipped, like in grad school. Then I was doing piano and like people were like genuinely surprised, but like in a sort of negative way. Like it was kind of interesting. But even, in the pop music world, it's more common to be like, yeah, singer, songwriter, producer, arranger, like this instrument, this instrument, this instrument. So yeah, maybe classical music could learn a little bit from that world.
Yeah, I'm just struck by chatting to both of you, seeing the different sides and the different worlds and how there are aspects of both that the other side could learn from and pull into it. Because I do think a lot of times in classical music, there's that emphasis on one focus can be discouraging if people have a lot of different interests or are doing a lot of different things. And so I think it's really cool to see in the popular music world how that's more embraced and can help produce musicians who are really versatile and able to be in a lot of different diverse settings. And I feel like the way the music world is going, classical musicians have to be able to do that anyways.
Totally.
So I think it's really important that even just to know that and, maybe to look at the other side and see how you can benefit from that, and for popular music to look at a lot of the benefits of classical music and how they can pull that in, I think is really important.
Yeah.
Shawn, I just wanted to end with you and your career, and what are you thinking of for your future and what you're looking to do, with future projects and in the classical and the popular music space.
Surprise, classical music.
Totally pivoting.
I don't know if I can pivot anymore. But, so currently what I do, I would categorize my job into 4-ish main things. First off, I'm working at a church in Temple City. That same worship director that picked me up so long ago, I'm very fortunate to be continuing to work with him. He's now heading a church in Temple City, so I'm helping him out with that. So I'm still directing worship and doing a little bit of graphic design and stuff there too, so which is cool. Number 2, I'm still working with Alabaster, like I mentioned. So we're still, going strong with our music, and I'm also helping with some ad design work for them, which is really cool. Not something I imagine myself doing, but I'm very happily doing with their marketing team. Currently, we're about to release our first how should I say this? Lyrical album. Lyrical album, I should say. So far, all of our stuff has been simply instrumental. So we've had some soundtrack things. We've also ventured into lo-fi music, which has been really cool. But this is our first lyrical album. with vocals and things like that. So it's called The Hymnal. It's going to be released, I think, shortly, I think in April, I want to say. I don't know when this podcast is being released, but it might already be out.
Link it if it is.
Yes, but that's really, really exciting. It's a giant collaborative album, and yeah, so there's that. The freelance work that I do, like I mentioned, I've been working a lot in the pop and especially the K-pop world as of recent, which is not really something I imagine myself doing, but has been a journey and it's been fun. So I've been fortunate to produce for artists like Taeyun and Alexa, and I have another project coming out with this streamer, popular streamer named Chou, which should be coming out later this year too. We don't have an estimated release date yet, but I'm excited about that. Yeah. So I'm still working on that freelance work. And then fourth, I'm also working on another side project, which is something that's close to my heart. It's called Homecoming Music. And it is a faith-based project, but specifically around Asian American Pacific Islander, so API writers and musicians and producers. We feel that in the Christian music space, we don't see a lot of AAPI representation, and a lot of the songs and music that churches use are not AAPI, even within the Asian American churches. So we wanted to create a sort of catalog and liturgy of songs that incorporate API voices and specifically are written and produced and headed by API artists. So we're working on that. That release should come out in May. I think we'll be releasing starting with a couple singles and seeing where that goes. Right now we've been hosting like songwriting camps and collaborating with different writers and producers and things like that. And it's just been a really cool journey so far, and excited to see where that goes.
Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah. And I really appreciate just both of your time and your willingness to pull back the curtain a little bit about your musical journeys and these industries that you're in and that you're exploring, because I just think it's so helpful for especially younger musicians, but I think musicians at any level, to learn more about what this career can look like, and everyone's journey is so different. And I also just find it really interesting comparing, both of your journeys and seeing the parallels between them. Even though you're in different parts of the music industry, there's so many parallels, and there's a lot of similarities in what both of your journeys have looked like, even though they're in different parts of the music world. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really cool and just really helpful to share, so I really appreciate that. I always end each podcast episode with a quick-ish rapid fire Q&A.
Let's do it.
So, cool. Stacey, who's your favorite composer?
Brahms, Rachmaninoff, and Chopin.
Okay, the
All
great trio.
Yeah.
Yep, and
Shawn.
actually mine too. Yeah, that's crazy.
Married for a reason.
No, I mean, seriously, I really, at least in my time in the classical world, like I really enjoyed playing Rachmaninoff, Chopin, and Brahms. So that was not planned.
Yeah, perfect. And who is your favorite pop artist, Stacey, and then Shawn?
Oh man, I know you would say Taylor Swift.
I would say Taylor Swift.
Oh man, I don't know if I have a favorite. I mean, is Sleeping at Last pop music?
Yeah.
Okay, I really,
so.
really like Sleeping at Last. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think he teeters between like pop, classical. I mean, just everything. He's a versatile musician.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say that counts. Mine is hands down Switchfoot. I've loved them ever since I was a kid, and there's a personal connection for me too, because I think their music has gotten me through a lot of hard times. I love how they incorporate their faith into their music without it, outwardly expressing like, oh, there's God or Jesus in these lyrics or whatever. But they just create songs that are just really good and universally just like accessible for everyone, Another personal thing is that when I was growing up, they had an Asian American keyboardist. Or I guess they still have an Asian, I should say they still have this Filipino keyboardist, Jerome Fontamilis. And I think seeing him as a kid, I was like, wow, there's someone that looks like me that is in this like American rock band that's doing great, and I'm like, that's really cool. I think that just really inspired me as a kid.
Yeah, cool. How about your favorite piece of classical music?
My favorite piece, I do really love the Chopin Nocturnes. They have a special place in my heart. I've played a lot of them.
How about you, Shawn?
Oh man.
Classical music brain.
I know. This is gonna sound so horrible. I don't remember the names and like the numbers and all that.
Oh no, it's
but
fine.
The Rachmaninoff is like dun 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 dun.
Well, first I thought you were singing Grieg, but
I don't know what that is. And then there's this other one by, I think it's Mozart's. Da, 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 da. The Tempest Sonata?
no, that's Beethoven.
That's Beethoven?
Yeah.
Oh, see, again, that goes again. Is that what I'm saying though? The Tempest?
I'm not. It's just hard to.
I don't know.
Tell.
This is why I'm the wrong person to ask.
Oh, no,
How about your favorite piece of popular music?
Oof. Oh man, that's so hard.
Current favorite.
Yeah, current favorite.
Just like rotate through favorites. Like,
Yeah,
you have, like,
I always
top, yeah.
I have this like playlist on Spotify that I'm constantly updating. It's called like Now Playing. It's just like what my favorite songs are of the month or whatever. Currently, I think just off the top of my head, Ariana Grande's new album came out last week at the time of this recording.
Yeah.
And that's been on repeat. I think it's just a beautiful album and really well produced. And then Justin Timberlake's new album.
Yeah. Been blasting
just
that
came.
last few
I've been
days.
blasting that. Just came out, I guess, yesterday at the time of this recording, or is it today? It's today.
Yeah.
Friday. Today's
Today's
Friday. Yeah, today. I guess
Friday.
earlier today. Sheesh.
We've all lost track of life.
All lost track of time, but I've been blasting that just all of today, and yeah, it's been phenomenal. I still need to like listen to it a couple more times and process it, but I'm sure I'll be doing that in the next couple weeks, and yeah.
It must be cool to like always be listening to new music, because like popular music is like current, relevant. Like we as classical
I see
musicians
what you
are like
mean. Yeah.
looking back, but like you guys are like constantly, you have to look forward, and like I'm sure that like influences
It's
your
great.
playing style a lot, and like
Totally.
especially like for producing too, since you do so much producing, like you always have to kind of like stay on top of techniques and what the sound is like, because like I feel like even me, I can always identify like, oh, this kind of sounds like early 2000s, but like as a producer you have to be like, no, if you incorporate this kind of stuff, or like I'm going to use these types of sounds because that makes it sound like 2024.
Such a great point. Yeah, it's constantly like, it's like fashion, I guess. Like, like looking at the latest trends. Like it's the same thing with pop music. Like they're trends in pop music. So like right now, I'm actually really sorry, this is not part of the rapid fire Q&A, but like right now I'm like really intrigued by this. In the K-pop world, there's this like trend with like UK house music that like is this really fast like double time drum thing that just originates from like the UK house movement, which is really cool. And then I would see a lot in American pop music. There's this transition back into rock and like punk. We see that with like Olivia Rodrigo or Demi Lovato and things like that. Like I was a huge rock head in high school, so like I'm personally just like I need rock back in my life, so I'm very excited about that. Or like Billie Eilish, like we definitely see that in her. So I'm just Yeah, that's a great point that you bring
Yeah.
up. You're just constantly looking at the latest trends and stuff.
Really interesting, and also just how quickly pop music moves.
Yes.
Popular music is so fast paced,
Yeah.
and classical music is so slow to change at times, a lot of times. So it's just interesting the impact that has then on the industry and
Yes.
the way that you make music and all of that. So yeah, just super interesting. Anyways,
Back to
the rapid fire
Yes.
Q&A.
Yes.
Not so rapid fire, but that's totally fine. I love the interjections.
Unrapid fire.
Stacey, what's a book that you keep coming back to? Either you keep rereading it or it's just something that has really stuck with you.
I mean, I can't help be a product of my generation, but Harry Potter. I mean, off camera, I have all of the Harry Potter books
I love it.
and audiobooks and a wand and a chocolate frog. Like, I'm into Harry Potter. And like, I recently re-listened to all of the audiobooks and like, it's so, I know the lines so well that I like, even listening to them in real time, I anticipate what the next sentence is. But it's definitely something I come back to again and again.
Which audiobook recording do you recommend?
Jim Dale, hands down.
Got it.
Write that down.
Shawn, how about a book for you?
Oh boy, I'm not much of a reader, but if I had to say a book, does the Bible count?
Yes, of course.
I actually, I mean, yeah, I would. I mean, even just like old books of our, back that we read back in the day, like childhood books, like Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter and Narnia, even. I think the last book that I really, really enjoyed was one of the Beatles books that we were assigned to read just like during college. It was just like going through not only like the life of the Beatles, but also the music they wrote and how that like kind of connected to the life events that were going on. I can't remember the title of the book.
That's okay. We'll figure
get
it
back
out
to it.
and I'll link it.
Yeah.
That sounds really interesting. That's cool.
Yeah.
Shawn, who
Yes.
is a musician you really admire and why?
Just kidding.
I guess I have to say John Foreman from Switchfoot. I mean, I think he has been, just influential. I love his songwriting and just his honesty and kind of vulnerability in his songwriting. I grew up listening, even I'd mentioned this earlier on in this interview, but David Foster, was a huge, person I looked up to in playing piano. Stevie Wonder as well, just current, even now, I love Stevie Wonder songs and playing them on piano and stuff. I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, perfect. Stacey, how about you?
A musician that I really admire.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, honestly, all of my colleagues.
That's wholesome.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know so many great musicians and have so many friends in the music world, and everyone has a lot to bring to the table, and I'm constantly being inspired to be better and to, gain tips from their style and things like that to grow my skills. Yeah.
I love that because that's a lot of why I wanted to start the podcast because I think, musicians are doing such interesting things and so many different things. And I was like, I just really want to share the stories of cool people like you guys who are doing really
Like you.
cool things. Well, thanks. But yeah, and I think just being able to share that there's really unique aspects about every journey and like you were saying, just to be able to take inspiration from what other people are doing. It might look completely different from what you're doing, but there's still a lot of wisdom and encouragement and things that you can get from that. So I love that. Shawn,
Yes.
what would you say is the most useful app on your phone?
Oh gosh. I mean, I guess messages and Instagram. I don't know. I feel like both those things I'm on frequently just to keep up with people.
Yeah.
And that's how I connect with people in this digital world.
Yeah. How about you, Stacey?
Messages. Like, I am definitely millennial. My phone's attached to me. It's right here because I didn't want to put it over there. And I would say my text messaging game is pretty strong.
Perfect. Finally, Stacey, if there was just one resource that you could recommend, so a book, a podcast, a movie, anything that you just think would be really beneficial for somebody to check out, what would that be?
Yeah, I got this book in grad school, but it's called The Music Teaching Artist's Bible by Eric Booth. And it's a really, really good resource, not just for teachers, but of course, really fundamental for teachers as well. And, I'm sure you can look it up and see what it's all about. But that was really influential for me. And that was, like one of the textbooks from school that I kept. And I have also come back to and constantly am inspired by and take away tips from.
And Shawn, how about a resource for you that you think would be really beneficial for someone to check out?
Yeah. I don't know why, but this is the first thing that came to my head is like the most general answer, but like just YouTube in general, I feel like I learned so much over just like watching YouTube videos. I learned guitar from like watching YouTube. I learned a lot of production skills and things that I do nowadays, just through YouTube. So I guess in general that I don't really have anything specific, but just searching up what you need, and just like utilizing that resource. Even just looking at your friends or peers or people in your network that do the things that you want to do is also a big resource, because you can just go over and just be like a fly on the wall and just watch what they're doing. And I think you absorb so much through that. And then you said podcast. One of my favorite like music podcasts is this one called Dissect. And it basically goes through pop artists of our generation like Frank Ocean or Beyonce or Tyler the Creator or Kanye. It's this music scholar. He went to music school and everything. And he argues as to why these artists of today are like the modern day Beethovens and Mozarts and Chopins and whatever. And he'll just break down each of these like albums and works of art and go through like songwriting and production techniques and skills that they used and specifically point out like, oh, this was going on in their life and or this is why they specifically chose this, or just really interesting tidbits and Easter eggs, and it breaks down just the artists and what they envisioned, and it's just it's a really cool podcast. So
it sounds really, really cool. I will link to everything that you've listed below in the show notes. Just to finish us off, if there was a final piece of advice that you wanted to leave with listeners, and then if you could also just share how people can connect with you, hear the music you're working on, YouTube channels, Instagram handles, all those kinds of things, if you could end with that.
Yeah.
I'll go first, I guess. I think for me, if I had one piece of advice is just to keep creating. Don't give up and to persevere, especially if you're a musician. I know things get hard. I know life happens and things might happen that might derail what you originally thought it would be. But just as we've talked already in this podcast, just to keep going with it. You just never know what's going to happen. For me, like I had to, take a backseat to music for about 2 years, which, was pretty discouraging, but I didn't let that stop me, I know COVID, we didn't even get to talk about that, but COVID really derailed a lot of people's music careers. I was very fortunate to be able to find opportunities to work virtually and digitally with other people and make that happen and still create music.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of us really had to get good quickly at editing videos and
recording,
making good audio, learning all of the different audio systems and
But I just personally, I'm sure for us too, that new people that it was just really tough for them. Like COVID, just a lot of people lost their ability to perform, and that was like their main source of income. But I think, even if there's a global pandemic, like don't let that stop you from creating. I think there's always something that we can learn. There's always some way that we can advance, and just keep doing what you're doing. Yeah. And I think it'll get there somehow, some way. I think that's my piece of advice. You can follow me on, like I said, I mainly use Instagram. So at Shawn S. Halim, I'm sure it'll be in the description box below. And you can see my stuff on Spotify, Apple Music. You can either follow Alabaster Co. That's a lot of my stuff, or I have a playlist on my artist profile that has all the works that I've done, and I'm constantly updating that, things like that. So
Perfect. Thank you. And Stacey?
Yeah, my piece of advice would be to take things one step at a time. It's really easy for goal-oriented people, really focused individuals like musicians like we are, to be like, okay, well, I want to do this, and I want to do this, and I want to do this, and I want to do this, like 20 things, and all at once, and by this time, and then you just get really overwhelmed and really stressed, and then, that's not good or healthy for anyone. So sure, write down all the things you want to do, like set a goal list and shoot for them, but take it one step at a time, because life doesn't always move us forward in a set path. Like, even if you make your plans, it might not turn out that way, like for good or for bad or neutral, but the best way to keep moving forward is to keep moving forward. And I think one step at a time, like patience is a virtue, right? And you'll get there, you'll get where you want to be, accept that there are certain seasons in life, and take it one step at a time. And find me at littlestace714 on Instagram, and youtube.com/StaceyChouMusic on YouTube, and my website is similar, StaceyChouMusic.com. I'm also on Spotify, so you can find me there as an artist and collaborator. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you both so much for your time.
Yeah,
thank you
thank
for
you.
coming on, and just your willingness to share your own journeys and the steps that you've been taking. And I'm really excited for what's coming next for you both, because you're still at the beginning stages of your careers, and there's a lot to come. And
Yeah.
and I think the advice that you've shared, and just really keeping in mind that everyone's journey is personal, and that the pathway, just taking it one step at a time and really taking the opportunities that come to you, I think is really inspiring. And so I appreciate you guys just sharing all your wisdom. So thank you so much for coming on.
yeah, thanks for having us.
And next time we'll interview you.
Okay, sounds good. Woo! Thank you.
Yay!
Yay! Thanks for tuning in to the Orchestrating Your Career podcast, and a big thank you to Stacey and Shawn for sharing their journeys and so much advice. If you enjoyed the episode, then give it a like and let me know in the comments below anything you took away from our conversation. If you're listening or watching on Spotify, it would also be a huge help if you could leave the podcast a review. The resources mentioned in this episode, and where you can connect with Stacey and Shawn and listen to more of their music, are all linked below. You can find the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other platforms, as well as get more frequent updates on Instagram. To watch videos of all the episodes and get extra behind-the-scenes content, check out the YouTube channel Orchestrating Your Career. Subscribe so you don't miss anything. Share this episode with a musician or anyone else you think might be interested, and look out for new episodes on the 1st and 15th of every month. Next episode's conversation will be with Ellen Schnagel, a trumpet player who studied all the way up to a doctorate in musical arts and is now a freelance trumpet player in the Los Angeles area. One of the super cool parts of her current career is working as a musician for Disneyland. So stay tuned to hear more about that job and her journey. Until then, please enjoy this clip of Stacey and Shawn performing with the Urbana worship team at the 2018 Urbana conference. So guys, take it away.
Hear you sing it with everything you got. Dimuliakan, dimuliakan, hey. yang